Greetings from Firstbeat and welcome to today's webinar, Health Workplaces, a science-based approach. It's great to see so many listeners online from around the world. We are broadcasting today from Jyväskylä, Finland, with our guest speaker Duncan joining us from Sydney, Australia. My name is Jack and I work as a wellness specialist at Firstbeat and will be hosting today's webinar. You can ask questions during the webinar by writing them in the chat window. After the presentation, I will read out today's questions for Duncan to answer. If we don't have time to all questions, we will send the answers to you via email. I would now like to introduce today's guest speaker, Duncan, who is the Head of Health and Wellbeing International Property and Infrastructure Group Lendlease, operating in Australia, Asia, Europe, and Americas. Duncan is an advocate for positive impact that workplaces can have on health and is a leading speaker in this area. He focuses on elements of workplace well-being that help people thrive not just at work but in life. The webinar will discuss how research and data together with behavioural strategies can be used to help people perform at their best level. The webinar will reference some of Duncan's experiences with Firstbeat lifestyle assessment. But for more details about the method or how to use it, you can get in touch with the here at Firstbeat, and we can tell you more or put you in touch with the right person. Welcome, Duncan. You can take it from here.
Thank you, Jack, and welcome everyone. Thank you for listening in on our webinar today. I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, where it's around 26 degrees, and I think you've got the opposite there in Europe with minus 22 in parts of Finland. So the reason why we're even talking about health and wellbeing is that we are seeing an emerging trend in our society that lifestyle disease and other areas are becoming increasingly important to how we live our lives. And you'll see that leading organisations such as the World Health Organization have now identified the workplace the #1 place to fight lifestyle disease. As you know, lifestyle diseases are largely preventable, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, etc. And yet many of these diseases are creeping into our society. So health and wellbeing will continue to be an increasingly important topic for us all, and especially at work, given that we spend a third of our lives at work. We also spend around 91% of our time indoors, so the buildings that we occupy and places we create are very important. We need to remember also that health is a journey. So my health journey is vastly different from many of yours. My health journey is around the ability to improve my surfing fitness and enjoy surfing as I age. But I'm sure many of you will just enjoy health and wellbeing from just being in a positive mindset, being fit enough to spend time with your kids, etc. So it's really important that we consider health as a journey, as a continuum. And we need to think about the multiple levers that we can use as health and wellbeing advocates to help people be their best. So not only thriving at work, but in life as well. When we talk about levers, we often talk about the levers are physical levers. So that might be the buildings that you occupy, where they've got internal staircases, natural light, good air conditioning, but there are also organisational levers, so what your business does for you or how those things change over time. Now, it's important also to remember that we're learning as we go a lot of the time, and we need to consider how can we learn from other industries, not just our industry and the property industry, for example. So I like to look at others to gain a sense of what we can do to improve our overall work scenarios as well. And one of the classic examples I like is this one, and it's from a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. The author is Daniel Canahan, and this looks at Israeli parole judges and their abilities to make decisions over a day. Over a 10-month period, they tracked almost 1,100 decisions made by Israeli parole judges. And it just shows that our ability to focus isn't always consistent during the day. So let's pretend, for example, we're in Israel, we've been sent to prison and we're about to apply for clemency. If our case is heard first thing in the morning, the chance of being released from prison is around 65%. Now, if you wait until around 10:30 in the morning for your case to be heard, your chance of being released from prison are very low. But the good news is that after the Israeli parole judges retire for a break, a 15-minute break, the chances of being released from prison return to a bit over 60%. But as you can see, as the day goes on, just before lunch, the chance of being released are very low. Now, this example is good to understand how glucose affects our ability to make decisions. And it's not just that the Israeli parole judges, for example, are bad people, but everyone takes shortcuts. And we know that in order to provide a prisoner for release takes about 13 minutes. And we know that sending someone back to prison takes about 6 minutes. So by looking at this, we can see that when you're in a hurry, when you're short in time, sometimes we take the shorter route. Also, if we haven't had the right amount of glucose in our body, then obviously it's not as easy to make good decisions. Now, one of the other interesting things that we're seeing, especially in Australia, is that we're becoming heavier. 59% of Australians are overweight or obese, and we're seeing inactivity globally is now the 4th largest killer of people globally. One interesting fact to note that is in 1960, about 48% of all the work that we did around the world was around 48% had moderate physical activity as part of the job. But today, only around 18% of our jobs have moderate physical activity. Can pretty much be mapped by the rise of computerization. So we're doing more sitting around, we're doing less physical work. Now, inactivity is one thing, but also there's a second stream of research which is around prolonged sitting. So having prolonged sitting is also leads to a range of chronic health diseases. In fact, if you sit for more than 8 hours a day, there's a range of chronic health diseases that start kicking in. And we, for example, have been looking at this science-based approach by putting medical grade accelerometers on 160 of our staff. We have more than 2,000 days of data about people's sit time, prolonged sit to stand transition, staircase use, the exercise they do, and we design workplaces now today based on increasing people's movement during the day. So again, by using a medical grade accelerometer, we're being able to change the design of our workplaces to make sure that people can actually increase the amount of work, the amount of movement they get during the day. Another thing that we've been focusing on a lot lately is active transport. We're not getting any extra time in our day these days, so the ability to build some exercise into your day is really important. End-of-trip facilities is becoming quite big, I know, in London and very much here in Australia. So people choosing to either walk, run or ride to work, and that is increasing people's fitness. But the thing that we're interested in looking at is the swipe card access. And so when people use these facilities, we then map where they ride from, where they run from, etc. So we can get a picture of how healthy our workplaces and our workforces are. In fact, we can run interesting experiments that if you add a free towel, for example, in the end-of-trip facilities, we then see a spike in people who exercise at lunch, either going to the gym or running. So just that small intervention by adding a towel can increase people's exercise during the day. So this is a way that we can use the evidence-based approach to actually influence their health and well-being. Also in our global office in Sydney, we have more than 2,000 employees in our global office, and we have about 10,000 plants. This diagram here, or this picture, actually shows our green wall that's at our reception, and there are more than 5,000 plants in this green wall. Now, we track the air quality around the green wall to see how effective the wall is at removing impurities and also bringing fresh air into the workplace. So it's really important, again, to not only increase the amount of biophilia in your workplace, but also measure the effect of the biophilia. Everyone acknowledges that we feel more comfortable when we're surrounded by nature, and we need to start thinking about how we bring the right plants and the right biophilic elements into our workplace, like natural materials and those kind of things. We're also going to see a change in how we socialise and communicate. They're talking about, this is a global trend of health and wellbeing, that social isolation and loneliness will be one of the major influences in our society going forward. And it's interesting to note that we tend to bond over food. So we are now designing workplaces to increase where people can come together, where they can share a meal, and hopefully by then you share information about what you're doing. We're part of a knowledge-based economy, and if employees aren't sharing information, then obviously our company isn't going to prosper as well as others that share better. So we can use food as a catalyst. We often use the term using food as glue to bring our people together and also to share information. I don't know whether also you track the likes of Tom Rath. He's one of the lead components of a company called Gallup. They run multi-million workplace surveys every year, employee surveys. And he has found that if you have a best friend at work, then you're 6 times more likely to be engaged at work. So engagement is now being a lever or a proxy for productivity. So again, our workplaces now being designed for people to come together, share food, meet new people, and therefore hopefully our businesses will prosper at the same time. So we believe that food as glue and increasing engagement will have quite a few benefits. We're also seeing a rise in many companies that are looking for purpose. Employees that have purpose are obviously more engaged in what they do, and we'll increasingly see companies offering volunteering and things like that so people feel good about the work that they do. This is something we often see in the tech sector, but I think more broadly we'll start to see companies offering purpose as part of what they do every day, whether that's through volunteering or doing work that helps others. I mentioned food, and obviously we spoke earlier about the Israeli parole judges, but it's very interesting for us to look at how food affects what you do. So there are many statistics that show that a lot of people don't eat breakfast, for example. And if you look at school studies, the kids that don't eat breakfast generally don't go on to perform as well as others do. But the other interesting fact is that almost 40% of all the food you consume is called discretionary food. That's the food you eat between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So in our workplaces, if you have unhealthy food, people are more likely to eat that unhealthy food. Whereas we're noticing that people are putting far healthier food into their workplaces today. About 4 years ago, we ran a study to find out how much food was actually consumed by our employees. So we just counted up all the food that was consumed over a month period, all the soft drinks, all the biscuits, etc. And we found that by making small changes to discretionary food, we could increase the amount of fibre that our employees were getting, but also decreasing the amount of sugar. sugar is becoming a major talking point for our workplaces today. And just by providing the right food, it meant that our employees are more likely to have a healthy diet. This is where behavioural economics and nudge theory comes in. So we made it very hard for people to find Coca-Cola and, of course, chocolate biscuits. So they were eliminated from our workplace. But we made fresh fruit, high fibre biscuits, low glycemic index muesli, etc., very easy to find in the morning. In fact, when you walk around our workplaces, the food is strategically located so that when you walk past it many times during the day, and when you're actually hungry, you think, actually, I'll go back and get one of those bananas or an apple during the day instead of going for a chocolate treat. In the experiment that we ran 4 years ago, in the first year alone, we saved almost 1,000 kilos of sugar not consumed by employees. That was 980 employees, and we reduced their sugar intake in 1 year by almost 1,000 kilos. So the small changes can make for big impacts later on. So moving away from food and moving more into our topic today, we are trying to understand what we can learn from elite sports and help our corporate athletes perform at their best. And of course, Firstbeat has been a pioneer in this, and the ability to have wearables is very important. I should also say that Firstbeat have been very generous with not only helping me with the monitors, etc., but I've had some great coaching here in Australia by Frontier Wellbeing. Martin and Christy, if you're out there, thank you for all of your guidance. But again, there are quite a few of us that are all working at the moment on the same issues, which is all about helping people perform at their best, not only at work, but in life as well. So this is really important that we need to keep on sharing information, and this is why I'm doing the webinar today. And I hope some of you also will share some of your experiences in webinars in the future. So this is obviously a picture of how I live my life. This is actually in the middle of winter, and we swim at 6:30 every morning at the beach before we go to work, or not every morning, but 3 or 4 days a week. But this is a good example of, I have used on multiple times a Firstbeat device, and I find that on the days that I start the day with a swim, I have a much better day. We're finding it's not really the amount of stress that you have during the day, but it's really about the amount of recovery. And understanding truly restorative recovery is important, and that's something that we need to get better at. And I think programs that help with this should be applauded. The little program that I run is called Manage Your Energy Renewal. I just run 600 people through that program in China, Singapore, some parts of Europe and in Australia. And we have about 1,200 days of data on what we believe the triggers of stress and the best techniques for recovery. So the program's pretty simple. We use the Firstbeat device in a group setting. So I have between 15 or 20 people in a group. We then provide individual feedback to those people in that group setting. We do a group workshop that talks about the science of heart rate variability. And then we, using social norming techniques, we do some working on what people would change about what they're doing. So we believe that small changes made over time make a big difference. And we make those changes by introducing also a set of takeaway packs. So we talk about the 3 key things that we believe we can change and help people with, is teaching them how to diaphragmatically breathe, how to get a good night's sleep, and how to take a deliberate break. So not many people understand what a true restorative break looks like. They think that having 10 minutes looking at Facebook on your phone is a restorative break, but all of the practitioners will tell you that you need to have a great break you need to ideally do that with someone. So that's the social element of having a break. That could be with food or taking a walk outside with someone, so we know nature is deeply restorative as well. So our program actually helps people unlock what works for them in their workplace setting. And obviously we're dealing with people, some are shift workers who are doing night shifts and working on large infrastructure and transport projects, right through to senior executives within companies. So we see a broad range of people going through the programs, but the reality is many of us have the same issues. We have found that we get really deep engagement from our participants when they receive accurate, personalised information. So the lifestyle report is absolutely critical in engaging people. I think that's a very powerful tool in terms of that. We also find that people think that just because they're sleeping, they think they're recovering, but we know that not all sleep is created equal. And on many occasions that people aren't getting a great night's recovery, even though they're technically asleep. Daytime recovery is also not fantastic. And we teach people how to, again, take these deliberate breaks or some downtime so they can increase the amount of daytime recovery. Also, we're seeing interesting points during the day where we have high stress areas where people are trying to finish work and get home. We work quite long hours in Australia, and we see quite a lot of stress towards the end of the day when people are trying to manage out their work commitments and also get home and start the rest of their life, which is largely at home as well. We see lots of things, and that's good that when we are in this workshop scenario, we can share what kind of elements are influential for those kind of people. So again, the workshop combined with the analytics again is very critical. I must say we also use other devices. We also have programs using Fitbits, and we use other sleep techniques, active watches and stuff. So we use different wearables for different programs, but I think getting accurate, good data that's individualized and then can be grouped is very powerful to move the business forward. I'm just going to put up on the slide a couple of interesting things that we've witnessed. Obviously in Australia, many people don't mind a drink on a Friday night, and we're seeing social drinking is quite important. Obviously, the older you are, the less quickly you recover, and I know that as someone in my late 40s. When I was in my mid-20s, I literally had no hangover at all, and then by my late 40s, even if I sniff a glass of wine, I wake up with a headache. So it's interesting to see that recovery declines within age, and also when you take alcohol. So we're seeing some real differences here in this first night's sleep that almost looks very good, their sleep pattern, and then the second night when they've had a few drinks. In fact, their stress is so high when they're asleep, it's higher than at any point during the day. So it really does show the effect of alcohol. We also have quite a lot of people that do F45 and do lots of sports in Australia, and we see that those people that exercise after 6 p.m. at night really do experience some delays in their recovery. This shows a night where no exercise, but some exercise in the morning, and then their recovery was delayed. I often say to people, if you can't exercise in the morning, then probably nighttime exercise is still good, but just bear in mind it's going to impact your sleep going forward. We also see time of day when people are sleeping. So this is one night when we've got a shift worker. This is when they're sleeping normally. I think they went to bed at about midnight. And this is the next day when they didn't get to bed till about 10 o'clock in the morning. We're seeing a huge decrease in the amount of recovery they're getting just because they're on shift works, etc. And also we're finding obviously that as we age, the amount of recovery you get decreases. This is an older person, and of course within our workplaces we'll have a huge range of age groups going forward. I don't know whether any of you have read a book called The 100-Year Life by Linda Grattan, but she predicts that the 100-year life is real and we'll be working into our 70s and 80s. So in that case, we're going to have a huge amount of people from graduates at one end who might be 18 or so, right through to people who are 70 or 80 still working. So they're going to have a vastly different way of recovering. We'll need to be mindful of that as we go through and understand our demographics and our working demographics. But I just want to also end on this last slide. This is something that people take a lot of interest in, and science is one thing, which is we know what to do and we know all the things we need to do to live a long and healthy life, but often habits and bad habits in particular get in the way. So we talk to people about trying to make small changes to your day which increase to a more healthy life. It's based on some of David Brailsford work. So as you may know, he's a coach at Team Sky, a cycling team in the UK, and he's written a thesis about the application of applied marginal gains, so the theory of marginal gains application. And this is about doing small things that add up to big change over time. So we always say to people, don't try and change 3 or 4 things in your life, just try and focus on 1 or 2. And that might be that you focus on getting a better night's sleep, or you might focus on at least eating your breakfast. We also know that if you can encourage people to lock down keystone habits, so this is the work of Charles Gundig, that obviously we can get better traction, because if you sleep well, then you're more likely to make better decisions around breakfast. And if you exercise in the morning, you're probably more likely to be more positive into your interactions, because you will have had dopamine in the morning through your body. So these small changes made over time can actually influence us in quite a big way over time. So we always encourage people just to look at the wheel of all the things that they do during the day and what are the small changes that they can make in their day, which again equals a large change over time. So we call that your best day at work, or designing an ideal day at work. So that's all I want to cover today. I think my time is up, but I just wanted to say that we need to continue learning from each other, and it's more powerful if we can share all the learnings that we are learning as an industry, and how we apply those learnings then into workplaces, which could involve using wearable technology to help engage people, but also could just be the application of better habits, creating social norms, so getting people together, getting some accountability between people and developing new norms. And so there are many ways that can influence health and wellbeing over time. And as I started the presentation, I believe that health and wellbeing is actually a journey. Everyone's at a different stage in their journey. So it's just getting people to start the journey and make small changes that hopefully add up to big change over time. So thank you for listening in today, and I look forward to hearing from you at some stage in the future.
Thanks, Duncan, for your great presentation. There were many great ideas, small tips and goals which we can bring to our own and hopefully also to our customers' daily lives. That's all the time that we have today. The podcast of today's webinar will be available in a few days. If you have specific questions about today's topic, feel free to get in touch with Duncan directly, or if you have interested in hearing more about the lifestyle assessment, you can contact info@firstbeat.com. Thanks a lot, Duncan, and everyone else for taking part. See you in the next webinar in March. Thank you.
Thank you.